Welcome to our final panel discussion, Dr. Bethune's Philosophy of Advocacy, moderated by Jotaka Eaddy, founder and CEO of Full Circle Strategy. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to be here. First of all, it has been a really exciting day, and we are really excited for this conversation. I personally, and on behalf of the panelists, and I know they'll say it themselves, want to thank the National Council of Negro Women for bringing us together. Thank you to Dr. Janetta Besh-Cole and to Janice L. Mathis for your visionary work in reminding us and rooting us in Dr. Bethune's visionary practice and visionary philosophy for how we should organize and use our power. I want to first introduce the guest panelists that we have today. It's quite exciting. I'm excited to have this conversation and dig deep with these two extraordinary women. First, we have Ms. Waikinya Clanton. She is a social, political, and a force and a change maker. She serves as a strategic advisor to the Democratic National Committee. She has previously served in various capacities, serving as a leader of national organizations on Capitol Hill, and most importantly, bringing joy and power to Black women across the United States. Welcome, Waikinya Clanton.
Thank you so much, Jotaka.
Next, we have Sister Helen Butler. Sister Helen Butler is the executive director of the Georgia. She is the executive director of the Georgia's Coalition for the People's Agenda. Might I add that Helen has years and years of experience in organizing and movement building, and she played a significant role in the historic moment that we had in the 2020 general election in historically moving Georgia to a new political era and helping usher into to Capitol Hill, Georgia's first Black U.S. Senator, and also played a strategic and important role in what became the election of our first Black woman vice president. I must also add that both Waikinya and Helen Butler are proud members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, in which we all share with the legendary Dr. Bethune. Welcome, Helen.
Well, thank you, Jotaka. I'm glad to be here with everyone.
Well, we are really excited for this conversation. I'm ready to dig in, but before we get started, we have a very special greeting from a very special person. She is a fierce leader, representative of the people of Ohio's, and she's also the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, might I add, another proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We'll now hear from Congresswoman Joyce Beatty.
Good afternoon. I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. I am honored to address the National Council of Negro Women's Symposium today. I salute and applaud your empowering and innovative agenda of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. First, let me thank Executive Director Janet Mathis, the Board of Directors, staff, President and Chair, good friend, Dr. Sister Janetta Cole. Thank you for the invitation to join you today and for the work that you do every day to empower women of African descent. Today is an exciting opportunity for me to acknowledge, honor, and celebrate the visionary Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, one of Black America's true pioneers, one of the most important Black educators, civil and women's rights leaders in our nation's history. She was president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, and I'm proud to share that one of her dear friends, my grandmother-in-law, Mamie Moore, was the national vice president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. They knew that Black girls rock before we were born. Dr. Bethune's legacy needs no embellishment. She will be the first Black American to have a state commission statue in our United States Capitol's National Statuary Hall. It's the National Council of Negro Women's work that elevated us to sit in the White House and the United States Congress, not only as caretakers and advisors, but as the president and vice president of this great nation. And yes, as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Today, the CBC continues to serve as the conscience of the Congress as we craft solutions to respond to the three pandemics our nation faces: COVID-19, the economic pandemic, and the fight for social justice. 2021 marks the CBC's 50th anniversary, and I am honored to serve as the chair and lead our 58 members by using our voices to promote our power, our message. Our first priorities will include working with the Biden-Harris administration to deliver relief to our constituents who have been disproportionately devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic, by treatment for those infected, education to prevent further spread, and vaccine delivery. We will lead by example. CBC members rolled up our sleeves and got the vaccine to demonstrate our trust in science and medicine. Black people make up only about 13% of the American population, but we are dying of the coronavirus at 15 to 16%. We support funding relief to families in need of housing assistance and forbearance on mortgages, aid to small and minority businesses. Black American unemployment rose to over 14% compared to the roughly 10% overall average. Black Americans suffer due to lingering effects of predatory lending, diluted consumer protections, and lack of access to capital. We will work to pass the Jobs and Justice Act and tackle the pervasive issue of criminal justice and police reform by seeking swift passage of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which will hold accountable those in law enforcement who abuse their power. You see, we remember 8 minutes and 46 seconds on his neck. Our call to action is for us all to work together to ensure that we have access to the ballot and work to undo the problems caused by recent judicial decisions that undermine the Voting Rights Act. The past November election and runoffs in Georgia demonstrated what we can do if we utilize our power, our message to vote. And as the first ever Diversity and Inclusion Chairwoman of the Congressional Financial Services Committee, Chairwoman Maxine Waters and I are working to demand greater diversity and inclusion performance throughout all corporate America. Countless studies have found that the future success of our economy depends on the full economic inclusion of all Americans. If we leverage Black and female contractors, invest in STEM education, close the digital divide, help companies reduce the racial wealth gap, and strengthen our economy, that is our power, our message. Thank you, National Council of Negro Women, for your agenda of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And it is always the right time to do what is right. So let's go build back better. Thank you. I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve this message.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Beatty. And you know, I love it. I don't know about you and Waikinya and Ms. Helen. Every time she says, "I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty and I approve this message," I get little chills every time I hear it. So, such powerful words.
That's all we need. That's all we need, Jotaka. We just need Black women's approval, and then that's it.
Oh, yes.
So I want to start us off. I want to reflect, because this entire Symposium, these perspective on ideas, and is an action agenda. And we're here to talk about putting to action the ideas that we heard today, really built around the philosophy of Dr. Bethune. I want to read a quote from Dr. Bethune, and then I'm going to ask both of you your own words to reflect on those words. And these are her words, and I quote, "I leave you respect for the uses of power. We live in a world which respects power above all things. Power, intelligently directed, can lead to more freedom. Unwisely directed, it can be dreadful, destructive force. During my lifetime, I have seen the power of the Negro grow enormously. It has always been my first concern that this power should be placed on the side of human justice." Dr. Bethune.
Yes.
Very powerful.
Very.
Very, very, very powerful. I want to start with you, Helen. Your reactions to that statement, your thoughts on that philosophy around the use of power, and then I'd love to hear you chime in, Waikinya.
Okay, Jotaka, thank you. And to NCNW, Dr. Cole and Janice Mathis. This is such a great opportunity, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this opportunity. And Dr. Bethune said it right, that if you use power right, you can exercise freedom, you get freedom. And then you also can do it on the side of justice. But if you use it unwisely, oh, what do you get? What did we see? People grasping for power on January 6th with the insurrection, right? That is power, destructive power. But if you look at the power that people across the country, look at Georgia, exercising their right to vote, to select people to represent them, that's using power in a very good way to achieve your freedom. We got a US senator that delivered democracy for the whole country, not just Georgia, but it was because we were out there exercising our power in a constructive way. And Black women have always used our power to bring the community to look for justice along the way. And so if you look at Black women that have been on the forefront of Black Lives Matter, right? If you look at people all throughout the country, I can name people in Alabama, Sheila Tyson down there fighting for people, her people. If you look at Mississippi, Cassandra Welchin is down there fighting for people. Tamika Mallory is all over the country fighting for freedom. Mary Pat Hector, young people fighting for justice, for our people, for getting their rights. Davita Mathis in South Carolina fighting for justice. And I can just go on, but it is women coming together to fight as that collective in a very critical way to improve our communities. It is making sure we use power in the best way, not in a destructive way. So I say we still need to focus that power because we still have a lot to overcome, to get reparations, to get the criminal justice reform that Representative Beatty was talking about, to get voting rights. This is us exercising our power, and we can do it in a critical way that will improve the lives of our families, of our children, and it will be a legacy forever. that Dr. Bethune started with education, but it continues today through Dr. Cole and Janice.
Very, very powerful, Helen, very powerful. Waikinya, I want to get you in there on a reflection on Dr. Bethune's philosophy on power, and particularly the aspect of the use of power.
Jotaka, thank you so much for that question. And thank you to the incomparable Dr. Jonetta Cole and the invincible Janice Mathis. We would not be where we are today if it were not for the tireless work of the National Council of Negro Women. And so I want to say thank you on behalf of myself as a young Black woman who has had the privilege of watching and benefiting from your work and your labor to make my role possible. I say thank you to that, and to, of course, the legacy of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, my Sora, our Sora. In this regard, Jotaka, this quote is so powerful. And I appreciate you for giving us time to reflect on those words, because I think the first thing she says is, I leave you respect, right? I leave you respect so that you can use that power, right? And I think about when we talk about generational wealth, we always equate it to money. We don't think about generational wealth in the sense of passing down morals and values and network and net worth. That is a part of your net worth. And when she said, I leave you respect, I think about how Black women have always, since the moment we step foot on this earth, have been fighting for that respect. And we've been exercising our power in every respect, in every form and shape of the fashion. And yet we are still battling for that respect. You know, and I'm so grateful to the work of women like Helen Butler and Melanie Campbell and, you know, the foot soldiers out there who were doing the work, DeWanna Thompson. And, you know, I'm gonna call the roll just like you did, Miss Helen. You set the standard. You got to call the roll, because sometimes when we're in these spaces, we forget about those who paved the way. Jotaka, what you've done with Black women, bringing us all together, irrespective of our industry, irrespective of the jobs that we do daily. It's not comfortable being a Black woman in America. So let's dispel that fact. It's not easy being a Black woman in America, and it's not easy demanding respect, sometimes even from your own people right here in America. But it's still the charge that was given to us by our foremother, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, when she said, I leave you respect. So above all else in your fight, you already have this thing that's been given to you. This is your inheritance. Claim it. Claim your respect is what I took from those words. And you know, and Jotaka, I thank you for going and getting it from her will, because those were her last words. That was her charge. That was her gift to so many of us. You know, despite starting the school with pennies, she said, I'm going to pave a way with those pennies, not just to broaden your education, but so that you don't have to fight for the same thing. We all are here looking for love, but she left us love. We are here looking for respect, but she left us respect. We are here looking for hope, but she left us those things. And so as I think about the fact that she said that I leave you respect for the uses of power, what does that mean? That means when you get a seat at the table, it ain't just for you. It is for everyone else who comes along with you. And you have a responsibility to that seat and to those people to not shrink from that power, because your presence in and of itself is a command of power. It is a command of authority. And so as I think about what we're here today to discuss in terms of inclusion and diversity and equity and accessibility, I want those words not to just be an acronym for you, but I want you to let those words manifest within you, because it is a calling. It is a charge that was crafted out of the vision of Dr. Cole and Janice, who said, this is what we should be doing. As the rest of the world leans in and focuses on us and finally give us the respect that we deserve in these spaces, let's make sure that we put some action behind these words and her mantra to us, the charge to us to do the things that we do, not only in respect, but also with love and in power, and making sure that we're passing that on for generations to come.
Very powerful. Whew. This is powerful. And for those of you who are watching, I encourage you to lift up what you're hearing. There's a lot of gems that we've already heard. There's going to be more. Follow this conversation. Follow at NCNW on Twitter, on Instagram. Use the hashtag NCNW Symposium, and really help echo chamber all that we're hearing today. I want to go back to a point that you made, Helen, and you and Waikinya, you started calling the roll. Mm-hmm. And what we know from this past election cycle, but also what we also know is that while the news media may be just taking notice to the political power and the power that Black women have held, that what we know is that Black women, we've been doing the work. We've been in community. We've been doing this work. And the women that we're reading about and hearing about, they didn't just start 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They've been doing work for 20 years, often with little to no resources and absolutely no recognition. What we also know is that Black women's power is not only elevated in this moment, but people are starting to try to tap into that power. I want to talk a bit more and hear a bit more about this notion of power being on the side of human justice. And you mentioned some of our sister leaders like Tamika Mallory and the work that she's doing with Until Freedom, and our young sisters like Mary Pat Hector and others that are pushing on the side of justice. Can you just talk a bit more about how Black women have demonstrated our political power and placed that power on the side of human justice?
Well, as I said, Jotaka, you brought the collective of win with Black women together that has a diversity of women using their power, but collectively using that power for justice. And when you talk about inclusion, you're talking about inclusion of everything that impacts our lives. We want to make sure that Black women, that our race in itself is included and gets its share, because we put in so much into that. You see, as I said, people like Tamika that is going across the country, standing up, sometimes being arrested to be sure that we're going to get justice for our people. We can't just stand by and let things happen to us. So Black women are taking that initiative to bring justice to the community, whether it's economic justice, looking at what kind of corporations do we give our money to? What kind of businesses do we start ourselves to give our own economic and our own justice? What kind of, education sources can we provide to give justice to our children being on an equal footing and attaining equality, not equality, but equity. Equity, not equality, but equity, that we're able to build the wealth in our communities. We're able to make sure that their future is secured and safe. That's why you have people like Sheila Tyson down in Alabama, making sure that her community is getting the vaccines as they should, because we are most impacted. That's justice, right? You cannot just sit idly by and take what comes. You have to fight for that justice. And we are out here on the lines fighting for that justice. And that's what you find Black women doing all the time. Cassandra in Mississippi is making sure they were adversely impacted by the storm. Do we have water? Do we have the basic necessities? Do we have things that will help us survive and strive and achieve justice? So justice comes in a lot of forms for us, and it's more of justice for the community. A lot of times Black women don't look for justice for themselves. They're always thinking about, okay, Now I got to take care of grandmother, right? I got to take care of my husband, make sure he's doing okay. I got to make sure that my neighbor is surviving. I just got to make sure that the homeless person that I don't even know is covered for the winter. I've got to make sure justice is done in all aspects of life for my community. So Black women are always at the forefront, making sure that our community is getting what it needs and can strive, achieve, and do whatever we feel that we need to have. But we've got to fight for that. And so, as Dr. Bethune said, you have to look at human justice, not just self-justice, but human justice. For it may be not just my family, it's your family, Waikinya's family. It's all of our family coming together to ensure that we're doing and we can achieve whatever we need, but basically have that basic need taken care of so that we can survive and strive.
That's a very important point, Helen. And as Dr. Cole reminded us on one good Sunday, that when Black women enter, we see everybody. But often when others are at the table, they don't see us. Waikinya, I know you work to organize women in the Democratic Party and beyond. I want you to talk to us a bit about the approaches you use to make sure that Black women and just Black communities understood the importance of voting.
Jotaka, thank you so much for that question. My approach is always this: community first, right? First of all, Black women in particular don't need anybody telling us what to do. That is clear, right? I think the posture that I took in my role, even before I became senior advisor at the DNC, was to see my community as a whole, right? I didn't go to it, being born and bred Mississippi, Black community, all Black everything. My mama tell you from the time I came out, she said I was the Blackest child she ever had, and I'm not the darkest, okay? So, but that was important for me because I understood, one, that my community was not a monolith, right? I myself am not a monolith. I'm a Black Southern woman, a Black Southern Christian woman with a father for a pastor, HBCU graduate, moonlighting artist, so there's just so many facets to us as people. And so to approach our community with just a fixed lens is insulting, first of all. And so one of the things I wanted to do in that position was dispel all the myths, the stereotypes that people thought they knew about my community, the things that they thought that we cared about. I said, actually, no, you really should be talking to Black people about taxation. No, you really should be talking to Black people about economic development and job security and all the other wealth building principles. Criminal justice reform ain't the only space that we want to operate in. And so I had to shift the table. And a part of me being at the table was the ability to be able to shift it. I couldn't shift it if I wasn't there, right? And so the approach that we took with organizing was to, one, go in, create spaces for people to be heard. So often within our party, right, we had created this idea or this notion that we need to go in and save Black people from ourselves. In reality, Black people were saving the country from itself. And so, taking the approach of, one, creating space to listen, giving regular, everyday people access to the chair of the party was one of the most, I think, probably one of the most important things I did in my entire tenure, right? In that role, was because we had created these silos. We created a space where regular folks felt like no one saw them, no one heard them, understood them. And so, I was fortunate and able with the help of a whole bunch of Black women to be able to convince the people inside of the building to see things differently, to take our approach to the people, right? And so we got out of the building, we got out of Washington, D.C., and we took our show on the road. We stopped in Cleveland and we talked. That was our first Actually, that wasn't our first. Our first one, we convened a group of women at the DNC and we said, excuse me, will you all please come talk to us? We have this idea, we want to do this thing, but how do you think about it? What do you think about it? What do you see about it? I mean, how do you feel about it? And so they gave us their honest, unadulterated opinions. You know, we had this little card, you know, we wanted people to commit to vote. And they were like, we don't even know how committing to vote. We gonna vote. We need to know that y'all see us when we do vote. And so it changed our perspective in the way that we did it. And it gave us an opportunity to create some space for some additional issues to come to the table. And so we did that. We went to over 40 cities in 2017. So we started laying the foundation for the critical work that made it possible for us to do the work that we did in 2020. So we had the listening tour, then we refocused on issues for the midterms. We were pushing healthcare so hard because it was right when the Senate was looking, they kept trying to turn back the Affordable Care Act. They kept trying to turn it back and people were literally dying, you know, people who had pre-existing conditions. So it was important to make sure we were out there. It was important to make sure people were not only seen and heard, but they also were compensated for their work. So I piloted a Black women's organizing program. So I took my little resources from my seat at the table and I made sure that women like Ayanna Reeves, who was organizing in Claiborne County in Georgia, had money to run her program when no one was even thinking about Georgia, before Georgia became a hot topic in 2020, and doing the same thing in North Carolina and sending women to the state Senate, had women running for Congress there. You know, Mecklenburg County was always in play for me from 2017 all the way up. And so doing the critical work of building infrastructure, seeding, building trust, restoring those relationships that were destroyed in an instance. It was actually the Black Women's Roundtable in 2017 who released a report and said that 11% of Black women no longer identify with our party. And so, of course, that data point allowed me to be able to create a seat at the table for all of us. And so we were able to galvanize thousands of Black women across the country who leaned in to make sure that we were not just winning. It wasn't about Doug Jones. It was about Sheila Oliver in New Jersey for me. You know, it was about Justin Fairfax in Virginia for me. And then there was Doug Jones, you know, and the power of Black women in changing that election. So being able to use those cases to help make the case for the midterm elections, and we won back the House 19, we won some governor races in the Deep South, which was also super important. And then 2020, of course, we were able to take back the White House. And that was done because we did the seed work of listening, investing, and then letting people do their work.
Very powerful work, Waikinya. Now, Helen, I want to, Waikinya talked about this power, about laying the table, about, seeding work. We know that organizing has been happening. It's not anything brand new. Every opportunity I get, I'm like, these folks have been organizing for 20 years. They're not new to this. They're just true to this. We know that this power, we see the impact of this power, that Black folks, we are utilizing our power. We saw the election of first Black president, Barack Obama. We now have the first Black woman vice president in Kamala Harris. This is all wonderful and great and powerful. And we're so proud of this. But what next? What should we be focusing on now? Where should we be going now and taking that power that we have seated at the ballot box? Where should that power be? Is it focused on, creating more electoral power? So where should we be focusing on policies?
Well, there are policies that we need to be looking at, not only because you talked about a national level, but a lot of things are happening locally and at the state level. We need to really put forth that effort at the local level, because that's the everyday touch for us. If we want our streets paved, it's going to be from somebody in the local government, not the federal government, not the state, but the local. So it's critical. I think we have to focus on all aspects of it. We've got to look at not only how do we exercise our power to elect someone, but we've got to exercise our power by being that someone that is running. We've got to have people that look like us that will keep in mind where they came from, because sometimes a lot of people that look like us forget once they get elected that you came from here and you need to come back to that community to make sure it works. Everything I do in organizing starts with someone that lives in a community. I'm in Georgia, but I don't live in Albany, Georgia. So I have to go work with someone who lives there, who knows what it will take to get our community where it needs to be. We need to look at political power. We need to look at economic power. But you know, we also got to take a look at this old bad thing that's called racism that has fallen into back into big, I guess it's like Jim Crow again. It's bubbling its head again. We all thought with Barack and now with Kamala, we have arrived. We have not arrived. If you look at the policies that the states are trying to implement because of the power that we exercised in 2020, they're trying to take us back to the 40s when Dr. King and all those other civil rights leaders were looking to get us not only the Voting Rights Act, but the Civil Rights Act. I'm talking about accessibility, making sure that we can be engaged in all aspects of life and enjoy that freedom to do that. So we've got to look at everything, but critically right now is making sure we have local and state people that will do the right thing for us and build our power from there. Whether we're a business owner, our business owners got to exercise their power too in collectively improving the community. So it's not only political, it's economic, it's all the social justice. We've got to do it all because right now people are trying to take us back, and I'm not going back. I want to fight to go forward and not backwards.
Not going back. Helen, I wanna go in a bit because I know right now the Georgia State Legislature, they're just, they have had such an aggressive attack. Last I heard, it was more than 70 pieces of legislation meant to roll back to this point of rolling back. Can you talk a bit about getting engaged and how important it is to be engaged in redistricting and reapportionment? I know the topics are complicated, but there are ways, easy ways for people to engage in the redistricting conversations at the community level. Can you speak to not only the importance of being involved, how easily someone or easy ways that one could get involved, particularly for those who are listening, and then finally, how it connects back to the very point that you just made as it relates to ensuring that we have representation that will put our communities first?
Well, we got to develop a culture of participation, civic engagement. It has to be a culture. It doesn't start in November. It doesn't start in a runoff. It starts 365 days. It's a continuous process. So redistricting is built on the census. That's why we were out talking about, you've got to count yourself. You've got to count everybody in wherever they live with you. You've got to participate, because then based on those numbers, we actually get to decide who's going to represent us through reapportionment, drawing the lines. I know everyone has heard about redistricting. Well, redistricting means that all we're doing is taking that data from the census, drawing the maps to put communities together so that you can choose your representative. It's simple as that. A lot of it seems like it's, it's difficult to understand, but get with organizations like the People's Agenda, like Fair Fight, like the Pro-Georgia table, like NCNW, that can help you understand the concepts. But you got to be engaged. Learn to draw your own maps. We've got to draw our own maps, because I can tell you in Georgia, they're not going to let us draw the maps. They're going to pack us all in one district so that it dilutes our strength. And they're not going to, they are doing everything to make sure they keep control. They're trying to take over all of the local boards of election through some czar that is going to say, well, you made errors here, and based on these errors, I'm going to take over, but your county will have to pay for me taking over your elections. They want to control everything about the process. They want to control who is going to decide when the polls will open, how they will open, when you can vote, how you can vote, right? And then they want to control whether I'm going to count your votes or not, depending on that power. Then they're going to say, well, listen, I'm going to decide to draw your maps. You're going to be packed over here because I don't want you over here with me. We've got to learn to what it means to draw our own maps. We have great attorneys. We have lots of Gabboy in Georgia. I know Georgia Association of Black Women, you know, they are there to help. We have great attorneys like sisters-in-law that Janice and DeVita did. So those are people that can help us. The Lawyers Committee, LDF, Legal Defense Fund, I mean, the Leadership Conference. We got lots of lawyers that will help us to really draw the maps, but we've got to be engaged in that process. We've got to know what it means if I have a district over here that's maybe 50% versus 90%. Can I still win, or can I win even at 40%? And have groups that are unity types of groups. So we've got to learn that. We've got to be educated. We've got to be involved in that. And we've got to be ready, if necessary, to put some money on the table to actually hire lawyers that can present our case in court, because that's where it's going to go in Georgia. Because, and it's not unique to Georgia, because there have been about over 165 bills across 33 states already that are trying to roll these restrictions back so that they can keep control and they can take your power away. And we can't let them do that. We've got to be engaged. Draw maps. It's important, because in the end, it also means the money that gets sent back to our communities. If we don't have hospitals in Georgia, it's because we don't have the money to come back to do that. If our schools are failing, it's because they're taking the money from the budgets. The money follows the numbers. Numbers matter, just like numbers matter in turnout. We were able to send two US senators to Congress because of numbers. We stood in line, we voted, we didn't let anything turn us around. The same thing has to happen with redistricting. We've got to start to look at numbers. Numbers matter. Numbers matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Numbers matter. You also talked about resources and economic, and we talked a lot about political power. I want to talk about economic power. And Waikinya, you know, we know one of the greatest needs is for a living wage and closing the wealth gap. And it's so important that we're thinking about that in our advocacy, and also tangible, you know, things that we can actually do in community, or what can be done in communities to help close that gap. What can communities do, in your opinion, to influence leaders to address these needs, particularly around closing the wealth gap that exists?
Well, Jotaka, I'll first say power concedes nothing without demand, right? Like, if you want change, First of all, $15 an hour is nothing. And it is disgusting to me that the United States Congress is still going back and forth of whether or not that they should accommodate that, or whether they should cut that rate for everyday people who get up and work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. No family should be forced to have to choose between raising their child and feeding their child. No family should have to do that, or providing a roof over your own head and feeding yourself. You shouldn't have to do. This is the greatest country in the world, allegedly. So why is it so difficult for people to make living easier for folks? You talk about not wanting to pay for healthcare for people. Well, maybe if you paid them a living wage, right? They could afford their own healthcare. They wouldn't need you to subsidize their healthcare with the taxes that they already pay. So if you're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. When you want to talk about policies, all these things are connected. And it actually drives me crazy. My friends and I talk about this all the time, because when I'm sitting here and I'm watching these debates happen, and I have to turn it off because I live politics 24/7. And if I did not turn off my television, I would probably be a zombie by now, because some of the things they say and the things they do is so egregious, and it is in complete contradiction to what they swore to do as representatives and as senators for the people of America. Like, your job as an elected official is to protect the interests of your people. But if your people are dying because they don't have health care, what are you doing? If your people have been relegated to poverty because they can't afford a way out, what are you doing? What, you don't deserve that seat. And then every time you hear people talk about term limits, they get scared. Well, do your job while you have your job, and you wouldn't have to worry about that. This fight right now that we're seeing, and it's just utterly just disgusting to me, because it's so demeaning. To, like, my father and my parents have worked since they were teenagers. Like, my father has only known factory work, right? And I could not tell you how long it took him to get to making over $15 an hour. This is someone who has dedicated almost 40 years of their life to building things to work for other people. And you mean to tell me that people like my father don't deserve $15 an hour? That's egregious, and had a whole family to support. So I think that people who are making these decisions should probably take a step back, and maybe they should try to live out $15 an hour, right? Because we pay them a salary. We pay not only their salary, we pay their housing, and we pay their pension, and we pay for their flights. We pay for their health care, the same health care that they don't want to make sure the rest of Americans have. We pay for that. So whether someone's working in the grocery store or working at a Fortune 500 company, whatever amount of taxes that they pay into that system goes to support these people who don't want them to live. And I think that is what we have to start doing. We have to call it like it is. We have to connect the dots. I think Stacey Abrams may have said this in a conversation she was having a couple of months ago, Helen, where she said, you got to connect the dots. And she was talking about civic engagement. She wasn't just talking about the race that was stolen from her, the election that was stolen from her in Georgia. She was talking about how every piece of the puzzle made that egregious act possible. It was people leaning out when it came to census. It was people leaning out when it came to those midterm elections and those local elections. You have to participate at every point of the juncture. And I am so excited that we're at a moment in our country right now where everyday people are saying, okay, we voted. We got the administration in there, but what we doing next? And I'm so grateful to people like Helen and Melanie and the entire Black Women's Roundtable community, as well as the National Council of Negro Women, for leaning in when it comes to doing the hard work of keeping people energized, because this work is exhausting. It is tiring, but it is necessary every single day. And I think if we're talking to the American people about what we need to do, it is to recognize that the work that has to be done is necessary. Yes, it's going to take more time from you, but I promise you, if you look at it as an investment, you'll never get tired of it in your life, because what you're doing is seeding and pouring into the next generation. You're making it possible so those potholes that you keep running over on your way to work are closed for your kids who are trying to bike in your neighborhood. You're making it possible for sidewalks to actually come up so they don't have to worry about getting hit by oncoming traffic. Everything you do, that census determines so much that we didn't even understand, because they built these myths around what the census was designed to do, right? And why that it was such a critical part to your rights as a human that they didn't even want you to understand that, right? So I think, you know, when you look at what needs to be done, we have to be so intentional, and we have to be unapologetic about making sure our people receive information in the way that they can digest it, that it has to feel like light work. You know, it has to feel like light work. And I think that's where we are right now, Jotaka.
Powerful, powerful. Power conceives nothing without demand. For those of you who are watching in the audience, we encourage you to ask your questions and share your questions, and I will share those questions with our panelists. Before we go to our audience questions, and I think some are coming in now, I want to talk about, you know, Dr. Bethune in her powerful words that she left us with. She spoke about human justice and humanity, which is something that is threaded through all of us. We all have a humanity. If anything, in 2020, I think what we saw was what the COVID pandemic that we're still grappling with. We saw the unequal nature of society. The fact that things are not all equal, and we know this, but it was exasperated with the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw just really devastating effects, particularly in Black communities and amongst Black women, not only in business, but just people just no longer being with us, dying as a result of the mismanagement. If you could talk to us, both of you, with your remarks, and we have about 8 minutes, and I'm going to hopefully get to an audience question. I think we do have one coming in. But before we go to that question, I just want you very quickly to share just the importance of achieving health equity and your thoughts on how this should be, or if you think it should be a part of an advocacy agenda. I'll start with you, Helen.
Well, healthcare has to be a part of our agenda. We are adversely impacted by everything in health that you can think of. Mortality rates, obesity, the food deserts, you name it, the environment, where they place things. So health equity has to be a part of our advocacy, always at the forefront. If we're not healthy, we won't be around to get anything else. I mean, 500,000 people lost their lives to COVID when it wasn't necessary. If we could have just had protocols in place to educate people and to shut us down so that it didn't spread, would have been much better. Mm-hmm. But you've got to have people that understand your burdens or your problems. So it's critical that we get health equity. That is next to, I'm for voting rights, okay? I gotta have my say, but I think between health and education, because I vacillate between the two, because both are critical. But health, I can't do any of those other things if I'm not healthy.
Thank you. Waikinya.
Health equity is essential. I think that's the only way you can put it. It is essential. It is a must-have. It is not a need to have. It ain't if you have. It is you got to have health equity. And health equity to me looks like the resurgence of community block grants that made rural health centers possible so that Black people, poor people in general, don't have to travel 50 to 100 miles to find a healthcare center. Health equity looks like, to Helen's point, communities that have grocery stores and not just convenience stores because it's convenient for people to further starve our community. Health equity looks like the resurgence of earmarks, because once the earmarks die, communities start to die. Right? Earmarks were the chief negotiating tool. If we had earmarks, we would not be in stalemates right now in Congress, because everybody wants something. But when you take the something off the table, then everybody can do whatever they want to do and nothing gets done. So it looks like a balanced budget. That's what health equity looks like, because that means when you have a balanced budget in Congress, then you know what the priorities are, but you can't set priorities if you don't have a budget. Like, you keep having this continuing resolution to just make sure that your military can function, but you don't worry about American people functioning. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't look white. It don't look well to me. You know, you call yourself the strongest nation in the world. We want to be revered as a superpower, but how powerful are you if your people are weak? If your people can't get access to healthcare, if your people can't get access to pharmaceuticals, and when the pharmaceuticals that they do have access to are so unevenly priced, how can life-saving drugs be so out of reach to regular people who need them? Like, to me, health equity looks like people who don't have it spending some time, people who have it spending some time with people who don't. So you can really see how decisions are made in these households when you have a woman or a man who is the primary healthcare provider for their ailing parents, right? Who are also those same ailing parents who are doubling as childcare providers because we're in the middle of a pandemic, because we had irresponsible leadership who did not take this seriously. Health equity looks like more making sure that we don't lose 70% of Black communities. Health equity looks like we're making sure that housing developments do have the proper facilities, like running water, clean running water, making sure that we don't have lead in our paints. All of that is equity, right? And it looks like a prioritization and a budget, and you can't have that prioritization if you don't have a budget. So it looks like a balanced budget to me.
Well, thank you. We are nearing the end of this panel discussion. We did have an audience question, and if I can get a 30-second answer from both of you, and then we will close out with final comments. This question came from the audience, and it said, what are strategic steps that advocacy teams and groups can take to influence decisions within the political, economic, and social institutions? I'll start with you, Helen.
Well, I think it takes us to be at the table. That's number one. We've got to be there at the table to make sure that our voices are heard and that we have the power to overcome any of the barriers. That we got to know what it is and work there. So we've got to have, as Shirley Chisholm said, bring our own chair, right? If you don't have that seat, bring your chair. Be there.
A seat at the table. Waikinya?
To that question, I say all politics are local, but before they're even local, they are personal. So if you want to think about how you're leveraging your organizations to do the real change work, the real necessary hard work of getting people to move in your direction on issues, you've got to start locally. And it actually starts with what you need. Like, what is it that's going on in your community? You have to do that assessment. Once you do that assessment, you need to find your kinship. You need to find your tribe. Who else around you feels the same way or even stronger about the things that you do? Once you have those issues, once you have that tribe, then you need to get organized. Organization looks like power mapping it out. Who are the decision makers, right? So this is my issue. This is what change looks like, or what it needs to look like. Who is responsible for getting that done? And then mapping that out, deciding who all your drivers are, who are your coalition partners in that work, right? Who are going to be your amplifiers? What power do you have as a citizen? It's not just about being a voter. It's about what power do you have as a citizen. You have certain inalienable rights that are given to you, right? So whether you voted for that person who represents you or not, that person is responsible to you, and you have to hold people accountable. If you don't have what you need in your community and you haven't done the hard work of figuring out how you get that done, then it's on you. And so I say do the hard work of mapping it out, finding your tribe, and then, identifying the change and figuring out who the decision makers are.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to close out in a lightning round, and it will be a very quick lightning round of one question for both of you. And that question is, name the top 3 issues that folks should be thinking about moving forward. I'll start with you, Waikinya.
Ooh, okay. My top 3 issues that people should be looking at moving forward. I think you should be paying attention to how these confirmations are not happening in the Senate. And you should also be paying attention to what judgeships are coming up in your local community, because as Helen said, redistricting is real and judges will decide those battles. It looks like paying attention to what's happening on the front. For those of you who are in my generation, who are millennials, and you're talking about student loan repayments, you got to look at, you should be following what that looks like and whether or not we're going to get a return on our investment this election. Millennials are often left out of the conversation when it comes to policy. Everyone either goes a generation above us, a couple of generations above us, or either those after us. They don't think about us in the middle, who are the stabilizers of this economy. And then it also looks like more equity and opportunities in creation. Right? We need more innovation. And how are you being a change agent in those spaces and creating more ideas in those spaces?
Well, thank you, Waikinya. So I heard I think you gave us 4. So you gave us paying attention to confirmations in the confirmation process, and paying attention to what's not happening in that process, paying attention to the federal bench and judgeships, also paying attention to student debt and what's happening, particularly for millennial generation, and then finally equity in creation. Helen.
Well, Kenya said a lot of the things I was going to say, but hey, the number one thing for me is we've got to pass HR 1 and HR 4 to get the protections for our right to vote, because that is the seat of all the power that comes. Secondly, I think we've got to really look at what they're doing for privatization, right? For education and so many other things, the prison, we need to look at those privatization aspects. We've got to look at, how do I put this one? I think we have to make sure that we really become a true activists at all levels. We've got to be engaged. We've got to run for office. We've got to advocate. We've got to hold our elected official accountable. And it can't be a one-time deal. It has to be an everyday deal.
Well, good words for us to end on. And just to reiterate what you just said, Helen, you left us with making sure that we are watching out for privatization and paying attention to that. And most importantly, making sure that we are passing the John Lewis National Voter Act, which is in Congress, and then also finally being activists and organizing, whether we're running for office, getting people into office, but holding them accountable every way along the way. Thank you so much, Waikinya. Thank you so much, Helen. This has been a great conversation. And as I close out, I want to thank the National Council of Negro Women. I want to thank Dr. Jonetta Besh-Cole, Janice L. Mathis, and the entire staff team there. We encourage you to follow them at NCNW on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Use hashtag NCNW Symposium to lift up what you heard. And as I close today, I would like to close with the words of those that we have been inspired by with this entire symposium. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's, I leave you respect for the uses of power. We live in a world which respects power above all things. Power intelligently directed can lead to more freedom. Unwisely directed, it can be dreadful, destructive force. During my lifetime, I've seen the power of the Negro grow enormously. It has always been my first concern that this power should be placed on the side of human justice. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.